Morning crept upon the red keep as it always had, with a soft gray light that had no interest in the private torments of those who dwelt within. A briny breath blew up from Blackwater Bay, seasoning the stones, the cedar shutters, the tapestries that had hung long enough to forget their own dyes. From the highest windows of Mager's Holdfast a single gull drifted past like an idle thought and gave a thin, complaining cry, as though the day had arrived 10 minutes too early and with no good reason at all. Jaime Lannister stood in the long hall that led from the White Sword Tower to the throne room, gloved hands clasped behind him as a page sorted charcoal and parchment on a writing stand that had the flighty legs of a heron. The page's ears were pink from the cold. They were always pink in the morning, and Jaime had learned, over time, to mark the shape of them as if they were hours on a dial. He used such things now. He had begun to count by small, immovable facts. The page's ears pink at dawn, the chill in the stone whenever the wind worked its way under the doors, the way his own left hand, fine-fingered, strong, calloused, pronated with a whisper against his sword hilt as he turned. He had come to rely on these measures because larger measures had failed him, or he had failed them. He thought of fire, of muttered orders and foetid breath. He thought of a blade that had gone in too easily, followed by a sound like wet paper tearing. A sound he could remember more clearly than his mother's laugh. It was not true that everything blurs with time. Some things sharpen. The way a blade will sometimes seem keener after it is put aside, forgotten until it bites. He turned so that his back was to the throne room and its doors. The dragons cut into the doors looked back at him with the mild stupidity of wood that has no opinion of the living. Far down the hall, he could hear someone limping, slowly and deliberately. The sound of it echoed, and he knew who it would be even before he saw the silk drift of garments and the pale, thoughtful face and eyes that reflected light like old coins. Varys, smooth as an untouched lake. "My lord of the Kingsguard," Varys said with a small bow. He never called him Ser Jaime as others did. He made the address itself into a courtesy, as if he could constrain in it an idea about power that he had no intention of stating aloud. "A quiet morning. They are all quiet until they break," Jaime said, not unkindly. "Such is the nature of mornings. Their deceit is soft. Would that afternoons lied so prettily." Varys's hands stirred. He was empty-handed. The fact was notable in him. Jaime had seen the man conjure a tangle of notes as if from his own sleeves, ropes of rumor, spools of inked paper. "Has the king risen?" Jaime asked, and of course there was only one king now, at least in this city. The court had learned to turn the word over in their mouths carefully, the way a taster will roll a salted almond over his tongue to measure it for poison. "His grace was up before dawn," Varys said. "There's a musician in from the Reach, some plaintive little thing with a harp." They talked for an hour. Then came Ser Barristan for instruction. "His grace's habit continues." Of all the things that had changed, the habits were what had fixed themselves. Rhaegar Targaryen had always risen early. He had always loved songs. But there were differences, too. He no longer disappeared into his music like a boy sliding under river water. He took counsel. He accepted letters with his own hands, broke seals himself. He sat with Elia in the mornings and with his sister-in-law at noon, and with his mother in the afternoons when she felt equal to it. He had sent the Queen Mother to the Sept as often as she would go. He took Viserys on his knee once a day and spoke to him earnestly as if the boy of 6 might keep something of it. God save us, Jaime thought, he is trying. "Have you had word from the Hand?" Jaime asked. They had a hand again after a fashion. The council was a beast with 5 heads, and the Hand was the face placed foremost to the realm when it demanded a shape. Old John Connington was gone to his exile over a field that had broken him. The one they had now was a different sort of man altogether, dry and lean, with a careful mouth and a clever knack for maps, and a quiet that reminded Jaime of a palisade at twilight. Lord Hoster Tully had ever been a builder of ties. His blood was in this city now through a lady of Winterfell, though few said so aloud. Varys's lips turned. "The ravens are polite. They alight at dawn and say only yes and no, when what one needs is the maybe that opens into a road. But I am told a letter from Riverrun arrived by way of Maidenpool. I have not seen it." "You told someone what was in it," Jaime said. Varys made a gesture with one hand that might have meant you could teach fish to climb or you'll never rid yourself of the itch of a scar. By noon, I will have told someone's three slightly different things. Each will be the truth as far as it goes, and each will search out its own conclusion. The gull outside let out its small cry again, a thread of noise unwinding itself from the windowsill. Jaime looked away from Varys and down to the page, who had finished sorting the charcoal sticks by length and was bundling them with twine. The child sang under his breath, a dirge-like river song. The words were nothing. They went together as peas and stones do together when they tumble in a brown pot. The throne room doors opened. The room beyond them was something like a harbor, its heights dark yet and full of ropes of shadow, its open space catching the daylight as a basin catches water. 2 Kingsguards stood already within. Jaime did not have to look to know them by their breaths. The quiet, clean sound of men who do not smoke and do not cough. Ser Barristan Selmy, moving with a carefulness that was not age but the preservation of strength. As a man may carry a jar of rainwater down a mountain path without spilling it, and Ser Jaime was the other, because he could not mistake his own draw on the air, the brief hitch as he set his shoulders square to the throne each day, as one might tune a lute by habit. He took his place, and the page behind him fell into the ritual of their days. Rhaegar came without herald. He disliked the bellows of presence that his father had craved. He preferred a scribe to write what he had done afterward, if it needed writing at all. The courtiers who'd learned to fill Aerys' mornings with perfume had taken to filling Rhaegar's with maps and singers. Today he wore gray, a plain wool that made his hair seem whiter than it was, and at his collar burned 3 small garnets that looked like trapped fires. The harpist had not come. Jaime felt the absence of sound as a missing weight. The king's eyes took in the room and noted its corners as if he were counting steps, the way a man does when he comes again to a room in which he has once been struck. Then Rhaegar went to the throne, and for a breath he looked at it with the gentle, distant half-smile he had worn on the day of his coronation, when the realm had trickled together in this room and the air had been a broth of sweat and incense and the faint vinegar of worry, and the dragon skulls in the gallery had seemed to look down with their own dead amusement. He did not sit. He never sat in it lightly and never for long. He stood before it, and when the chamberlain whispered at the door, a tray of documents came, carried by a blond man with shoulders like an ox yoke and a new scar along his forearm. Rhaegar flipped the first 2 and answered the third aloud. Jaime had learned to listen to speech for what is left out rather than what is told. What Rhaegar did not mention today was the letter from Storm's End. What he did not mention and had not mentioned for weeks was Lyanna Stark. The king had learned the art of silence, and it set strangely upon him like foreign armor. When he was a prince, he had let silence do his thinking. As king, he let it do his choosing. The court came in knots and clusters. Old men crossed their own paths as dogs do. Younger men watched the king as if a blink might cost them a step up or a foot of ground lost forever. Elia came in by a side door with the children. Little Aegon was already fond of sliding down marble, and the steps here were too many and too high not to try them. But he had learned, too, where his mother's fingers would tighten on his shoulder in warning. Rhaenys followed like a small, decisive queen, more interested in the white cloaks than the throne. Jaime stood very still when she examined him. Her eyes were dark and frank and a little exasperated by the world. She had once asked him why he wore white like snow when snow was always wet and cold and killed the flowers, and he had said, because the snow keeps watch, and she had considered that and given him a short nod as if she approved of the answer but would think later if it could be improved upon. Now she curtsied to the king quite properly and then drifted immediately towards Ser Barristan, to tell him, in the sincere voice of children, what birds she had seen that morning in the courtyard and whether they were brave enough to approach the cakes the cooks had thrown out. Barristan's eyes softened. Jaime felt a swallowing ache and did not think of why. Riella came when she felt able. Under the candlelight she appeared statuesque and almost ageless, but daylight made honesty of her. Something in her seemed wrenched each time she moved her hands, as if years had dried in her wrists. Yet she wore the dragon well, had always worn it well. She had a way of looking at space that made everyone else adjust himself by a finger's width, an inch, a whisper, until the room had aligned itself. She had known the old king better than anyone living, Jaime supposed, which meant she had known tenderness and been paid in dread for it. She did not look at him differently since that day, and he could not tell whether that was kindness or a certain kind of justice. He felt the white cloak upon his shoulders. It had weight. In his sleep sometimes he dreamed of laying it down like a bundle of laundry and finding his own shoulders were lighter than air. Then he would wake and feel the cloth and feel the name he did not say, pressed as firmly against him. Aerys slid into place like oil finding a crack. The small council stood in a half-moon too narrow to be crescent and too wide to be charade. Lord Hoster was not there. The raven was still a rumor. Pycelle, in his robes thick as comforters, smiled the measured smile of men whose necks are made of vellum and who have learned to say mercy while meaning caution. The master of coin, a small-fingered, adroit man from Old Town, examined his notes as if coin were capable of breeding if you looked at it long enough. The master of laws, an aged knight with a nose crooked like a clasp knife, blinked twice between each thought. Men blinked a great deal in this room. It had become a court of cautious eyes. The first case was nothing and everything. A baker had struck a city watchman. The watchman had indeed been surly. The baker was contrite. The watchman would not forgive. There was a boy, of course, a boy in all such matters, hungry and missing and found finally asleep under a sack of barley in the next street. The city was a maze of missing boys and men who had been too proud and had found a reason to hate for half a day. Rieger heard them, this city. He took in the taste of smoke and flour and old tears, and he sat finally, not on the throne but on the step before it, and told the watchman that the king would eat bread from this man's shop on the morrow if the watchman would accept such a humiliation, as the watchman had taken leave to humiliate himself. The watchman's mouth opened and closed twice. He did not know the language. For this sort of thing, the baker wept and called 3 saints' names and left them all behind in the air like damp stones. Jaime stood. He observed. The city had not burned. He practiced each day the art of noticing this miracle. Later, when the sun had loosened its grip on the glass and the air in the throne room had soured with too many breaths, he was relieved. The morning had felt like walking on planks laid across a sea. He went to the practice yard with Ser Barristan because practice was a kind of honesty. They took only light shields and bare blades. They warmed each joint in sequence, and Barristan smiled without showing teeth, amused by his own body and its recollections. "You are fast," Jaime said, and meant both on the ground and with thought. "You are rash," Barristan returned, and meant both in war and in secret, and they bowed and they moved. They spoke of rhythm in the language of sound. The tick of breath, the strike of steel, the small scrape when a shoe finds grit. They could speak there without speaking. Barristan saw in Jaime what men are not supposed to see. He had the discernment of someone who had once failed in public and lived and walked away with a debt to himself. He did not say the word that could not be unsaid, but he held it like a stone he might place in the river when the current pressed too hard. After, they sat with their backs to the low wall and their swords as a third and fourth companion between them. The practice yard smelled of leather, old sweat, and the faint sweetness that rises from drought-browned grass when you scuff it with your heel. Below them a page chased a fox-colored dog with his cap. The dog had stolen it, and the boy laughed as he ran without any hope of success. "His Grace thinks to meet them," Barristan said. Jaime did not ask whom. "Where?" "Harrenhal," Barristan said. "He is too clever to call it peace, though he would have peace if the word were a bird he could coax to his hand. He will call it a council, and he will ask men who hate each other to sit under the same ceiling and drink from the same cups. Lord Stark will come," Jaime said in a tone that surprised him in its certainty. "Yes," Barristan said. "Lord Stark has the look of a man whose honor is a harness that chafes, and who believes his skin is the sin, not the harness. He will come, for honor. And the other?" They did not say Robert Baratheon's name in the Red Keep easily. The name felt like a bruised muscle you wanted not to press. "Lord Robert will come if his anger can be placed somewhere he can see it," Barristan said. "He is a hammer, and hammers do little at a council unless someone has had the sense to bring nails." Jaime's mouth twitched. He thought of Tywin then, hard and silent as iron held at a dull heat for hours. His father had not declared himself when Aerys died. The raven carrying the news had flown from the rookery here with a scribe's cool words pinned under its wing. The king is dead and the city is safe. The hand is sought and will be named. Those words had moved like mice under the skin of Casterly Rock. He had no doubt. Tywin would have considered them with no expression at all, and then considered the next 10 years and the next 30 after that, and had a mask made for each. Jaime had not seen his father since before. Sometimes he remembered a look, dark gold surprise, then a narrowing that could have been calculation or sorrow. It might have been either, in Tywin, which is to say it might have been both. There will be a price, Jaime said. He did not know yet by whom it would be paid. Always, Barristan said. He ran his thumb along the crossguard of his sword, an old, habitual motion, like a man stroking the silk hem of a cloak while he thinks of distance. Do you trust him? He meant the king, and the question was not disloyal in him. It was the question a man must ask when he intends to give everything without bargaining. Jaime looked toward the tallest tower, where the sunlight made a bar along stone. He thought until he could speak without tasting the dark shape of the other word in his mouth. I trust what he wants, he said finally. I trust that he wants to be better than what we were. Barristan nodded once, and then twice, and then did not nod again, as if to nod a third time would be to promise something he had not been asked to promise. On the second day after that, a raven came that had flown all night. Its chest was salt-streaked from the air above the bay. The parchment tied to its leg had one line only, and it had been written with a pen that had not been properly trimmed. The line said that Riverrun would send men to Harrenhal, and that Lord Eddard Stark would be there as soon as the snows let his riders cross the neck. And below it, smaller, as if written by a cautious hand, a note from Maester Vyman saying that Lady Catelyn had a child quickening within her, and that Lord Stark would not linger where lingering was not needed. The second line was a gift, Jaime thought, and set there precisely to temper any demand. Rhaegar read both lines and folded the paper twice only, and placed it on the step beside his knee. The step was worn smooth by 3 centuries of feet and the drag of a tail that had been sculpted in stone. With that permission in hand, a permission that was not that at all, but a refusal to make war with a man who had sent such a note, Rhaegar turned to the matter of the Dornish. Elaya's brother had come, not the patient, thoughtful one with the gout and the mind like a chessboard, but the other, who laughed often and who did not presently laugh. Oberyn Martell moved through rooms as if they were inns on a rapid journey, and people were doors he refused to linger in. Justice first, Oberyn said to Rhaegar in the private solar where the king heard counsel. Not music. I would have both, Rhaegar said. I have never believed they are contrary. The Red Viper smiled, quick and thin. You may have both, but not all at once, and perhaps not from the same men. He glanced at Elia, who sat by the window with her hands folded, delicate fingers crossed softly at the knuckles, as if she could hold them together by will. She did not speak for a long while. She watched the courtyard below, where her daughter was trying to teach her brother to throw a small ball, and where the ball rolled away more often than it landed in Aegon's hands, and where the boy's mouth tightened in exaggerated determination. Aegon had some of his father's long, straight nose. He had his mother's mouth. Rhaegar said, "The realm cannot hold if we pursue justice like a spear without a shaft." "Then give it a shaft," Oberyn said. "Wrap the point in a piece you can afford to throw, but do not pretend the point is gone." He tapped his own chest over his heart. "My sister sits and holds her children and listens to bells. Each bell says a different name. One of them says yours. Be grateful I have come as a brother and not as a blade." Elaya's mouth went softer then, and her eyes turned at last. "He has come as both," she said, gentle and dry. "You know our brother. He travels with 2 hands, and one always closes upon what he wants." She did not say what she wanted. She did not say what she feared. Rhaegar did not ask because he knew that some questions hold a pit at their center and to step too near is to fall. Later still, at dusk, the Queen Mother came again to the sept and lit 3 candles for 3 dead queens and one for the king who had been her husband. She had done this every week since. The sept smelled of wax and faint lemon from the pale-robed septa's sleeves. The light laid itself over Riella's face like a veil, smoothing the small bristling pains there. Jaime stood in the antechamber with two other wights and listened to the whispered shuffle of prayer. Not for the meaning, it was not his God, but for the discipline of it, the way words can be made to march in line even when the mind does not follow. He remembered a night, months and months before, all wet with fog so thick it made the torch smoke roll close to the floor. He remembered feeling the damp in his boots and thinking of the cost of the leather, his father's man complaining of it, and then the doorbellies. He remembered small, sly voices. He remembered the order. He remembered Rossart. He remembered how the pyromancer's hands had smelled faintly of copper and stale flowers. He remembered every piece of it with an exactitude more precise than the memory of his boyhood. And he remembered, too, the moment when he had looked at his hands and found them holding a thing they had not been raised to hold, and the fact that those hands had been steady. It was not a sin to be steady, he told himself. It is not a sin to be steady when the world shakes. There are sins and there are things that make men spit when you pass, and then there are things that keep streets from singing with fire. You can hold both in your hands and the weight will not balance, but you can hold them. It was his shield now in place of prayers. The sept's doors opened. The Queen Mother's attendants with their pale sleeve hymns came first. Then she herself, and she brought behind her a smell of beeswax and smoke. Riella's hand trembled when she let the septa take it. But when she released the woman's fingers, she stood alone and very straight, and the tremor passed into the air like heat. Jaime's eyes slid away without his permission. Varys would have said that observation was all, that a man is what one could say about him. Jaime had begun to doubt that. Something lay behind the sentences men made. Something crouched in the shadow of the word. That was where the choice was. He felt that now in his own blood, a thing like iron taste. On the third day, a rain came hard and short, and the sound of it on the tiles of the inner courtyard was like coins striking one another as they spill. It sent the servants scurrying down the cloisters and the guards to the edges of their posts, where they looked both relieved and exposed, as a man is when a storm offers him a reason to scour his nerves and then fails to last long enough for it to do him any good. It left the air smelling as though the city had just woken from a fever, and it left the sky a kind of pewter that made the dragon banners along the walls seem suddenly real and not like painted cloth. The king called Jaime then, not to the throne room but to a room not much larger than a pantry. It had a window with a view of a sliver of the bay and the smudge of the city's eastern wharfs. A table there had scratches on it that had been made by a man who didn't know or didn't care that everything Marks would. Rhaegar had a parchment before him, and a small pomegranate laid at the corner of it, for weight. He looked up, and Jaime saw that his eyes were tired in a way that suggested not a lack of sleep but a surplus of thinking. "I would have you go to Harrenhal before me," Rhaegar said without preface. His voice always surprised Jaime. It had no roughness. Even when he was blunt, he sounded like a man more interested in the shape of the sentence than the fist inside it. "As your shield, or as your mouth?" Jaime asked. "As both," Rhaegar said. "As witness, as the one who saved this city." He spoke the last softly and without ceremony. They did not say aloud, in rooms where air seems to carry everything to the wrong ear, what had happened and how. But Rhaegar spoke as if to one man alone. Jaime kept his face as still as he could. His stomach, traitor, had tightened as if a hand had reached inside and turned it. "Your Grace," he said. "The realm does not yet know how to call you," Rhaegar said. "It will have to learn. There is a name it might choose that you will not like. The city never has loved men who avert their holocausts. It loves its tragedies better." "I know the name," Jaime said. He had heard it once already, a his in a doorway from a woman who had lost a cousin to Aerys' temper and who remembered only the blood and not the fire that had not come. The word had found him like a burr. It rode with him now and pricked when he shifted his weight. Rhaegar breathed out gently. "It is not a bad city, for all that. It has merely learned to feast on its own smoke. Go before me. Look at the stones at Harrenhal. Speak to those who listen to steel and those who listen to oaths. Tell them the king comes not with torches but with a charter." His hand slid across the parchment. And tell them that if any man believes I will not hang those who burned for my father's pleasure, he mistakes me for another kind of dragon entirely. You will need a cause, Jaime said. A scaffold is only wood. The rope must be braided of more than intent. I am told, Rhaegar said, and the ghost of a smile shifted his mouth, that you Lannisters are good with rope. Jaime did not return the smile. He thought of his father's tapestries. He thought of the way a rope burns in the palm when it slips. I will go, he said. The words cost him less than he thought they would, and that, too, was a measure he could keep close, like the page's pink ears or the smell of the river when the wind turned. He went 3 days later, with 4 men in white and a small train of servants with salt-cured beef and sets of clean linen and one old maester whose knees crackled and who knew more about how to keep a man breathing in a ditch than most physicians with all their instruments. The road north was damp and quiet and full of broken things. A wheel abandoned, the spokes gnawed by weather, a hen coop fallen and let to lie, the long pale ribs of a horse that had gone down in its harness and been taken apart by dogs. War had moved across this ground like a plow, tossing up sharp stones. Yet the villages they passed were not empty. In one a woman sang as she beat rugs. In another a boy watched Jaime's company with huge eyes and did not run. Beer still foamed in cups at roadside inns. People still argued about prices. It was a country learning how to remain itself. At night, lying under a light canvas that snapped softly in the wind, Jaime woke and did not immediately know where he was. He smelled rain, old wool, the faint steel tang of his own sword. He heard someone snore. He remembered the way the king had looked at him, as if he were trying to decide whether Jaime was a kind of wind or a kind of roof. He fell asleep thinking of Harrenhal, that broken giant. He had seen it only once before. The castle had seemed too large even for dragons, as if it had been built by hands that had never held a human throat. They reached the God's Eye on the 5th day, and there the light on the water looked like metal beaten thin until the hammerer's arm failed. Harrenhal rose like a thought too large to be said. Its towers were chopped flat where dragonfire had bitten them. Its great curtain walls had stones in them the size of horse carts. They came to the gatehouse by a bridge long enough to hold a small tournament on, had anyone been so inclined. Once past the portcullis, the air felt different, as if sound were slower here and carried weight. The lord of the place was not there. The trident had pulled him away months before and left his steward, a man with a mouth that seemed to fold in on itself as if to keep secrets, who bowed and gave them rooms in a low tower that had escaped the worst of the burning and now smelled faintly of smoke still, though it had been generations since the dragon. There was a great hall with rafters blackened by time and hung with pennants that had seen half the families in the realm pass under them in the last year and more, their faces gray and hard and hopeful and hopeless by turns. The kitchen had been made young again by necessity. New spits, new tables scarred by knives, stores of grain piled like dunes. War has a way of making old places new by accident. The place did not feel haunted to Jaime so much as watchful, as though it wished not to be wasted again. He walked the hall with Ser Barristan, who had come by a different road with 2 of the white swords as escort and a quiver of small, readable frowns. They spoke to men sent to speak. They also spoke to women who remembered which men were worth talking to and which were only noise in a brightly colored cloak. On the second night, Jaime stood in a gallery that looked out over the lake. The God's Eye was vast, and the Isle of Faces lay upon it like a dark thumbprint. Fires burned on its shores where fishermen had made their camps. The fires were small but numerous, each a separate hope. There was music somewhere. The sound drifted along the lake and slipped into the gallery like a polite guest. Jaime leaned his elbows on the stone balustrade and let the dark be large around him. He thought of another night with music and shadows, of a boy who had walked the halls like a ghost carrying a book of songs at his chest. He wondered, not for the first time, whether Rhaegar would last, not survive but last, whether the thing he was making in the air, this delicate, careful net of words and quiet threats and sudden firmness, would hold. He had looked at the thing and thought it might cut the skin of the world rather than bind it. A woman stepped into the gallery beside him. She wore a shawl with a modest frayed edge and had a face too striking to help it. Bones that suggested an artist had lately carved them, eyes too dark to resist looking into. She had a cup in her hand that smelled faintly of spiced wine and of something else, cinnamon perhaps, or memory. "You are the white-grown Lannister," she said without turning to look at him. "Not your father's face, but enough to make a man's heart misstep if he is watching for the wrong wolf." "I am what the white makes me," he said. He was not in the habit of stating his name as a greeting outside the expected rituals. He liked to discover if people would hazard it as if they were placing money on a table. "The city speaks of you in two tongues," she said. "In one you are a boy who looks well on a horse. In the other you are the cut that saved a vein." "I am, as you say, a boy on a horse," he answered a little dryly. "And a vein saver," she said with a short, amused sound that was not a laugh. "Men prefer their veins to remain inside them, I have discovered." "Who are you?" he asked at last, because he did not know if she was the sort to offer her name as a gift or to hold it as a price. "No one, and twice widowed," she said. "I am the sister of nobody worth mentioning, and the friend of two maesters who gossip like washerwomen when their ink is terrible. My name would not please you if placed beside a famous one. It would be the dull clank after the sweet chime. But I am called Maria here, and I like the sound of it well enough. I have a voice that suits songs." He looked out at the lake again. The Fisher King is a story, he thought, and a story can be used to say one thing rather than another. "And what do you sing?" "Of being hungry," she said without pity. "Of getting your hands into bread. Of hammers and nails. Of banners stitched by poor women who stitch well because they are told the banners will make men braver." She sipped the wine, leaving a clean, damp mark on the rim. "I sing of how a king lies down on a bed he has made and has decided to be pleased with how it smells." "Are you for my king?" he said, and the word "my" left his tongue with a strange ease. "I am for whoever remembers that Rhaegar is not only a crown but a man," she said. "I have liked men before." The sentence carried a history under it like a current under a river's surface. She smiled, finally, straight at him. "You should sleep, white-grown Lannister. You will need to rise early and hear men tell you that the tricks in their sacks are miracles." "I will sleep," he said. He dreamed of bells, though he had not thought of them before sleep. He dreamed of ringing that had no source, only air. Men came to Harrenhal one by one and in pairs and in small uneasy packs over the next 7 days. They brought their grudges strapped onto mules and their expectations rolled in oiled leather. The weepers and the scarred, the men with new cloaks sewn clumsily because the old ones had been turned to shroud, the ones with teeth like stones tumbled smooth and men with teeth like dogs. Sir Jason Mallister with his chin like a ship's prow. Lord Roose Bolton, quiet as cold earth, a hint of something unpleasant beneath the scentless stillness of him. Lord Randall Tarley, all harness and law, the sort of man who would polish his own rules before he polished his sword. A Mormont came with a dark-browed woman for a companion and would not let anyone comment on it. Lord Piper, who laughed and then did not. A brace of phrase multiplied like a number gone wrong in a ledger. And at last, when everyone had begun to think it had been one more rumor that ends in wet, gray ashes, Eddard Stark arrived. He came without trumpeting. His men were lean and looked as if they had forgotten how to imagine food in portions larger than a good meal. He himself had a face you could strike a flint on. His hair had not been cut in a time long enough to say, and his eyes were the brown of the river mouth. His cloak had been mended with care that was not feminine, but was nevertheless careful. He dismounted as if his knees were a little stiff and his elbow had a mark on it that looked recent and specific. "Lord Stark," Jaime said, and the other man looked at him and did not blink too much, and bowed the way men bow to each other when they intend not to waste anyone's time. "Sir Jaime," Stark said, and the courtesy was real. It lay there on the ground between them. "Ser Barristan." They did not embrace. They were not that sort of men. They stood. Words would come. "It is his intention to come," Jaime said, once they had found a room where they could stand without their men and without the steward and without anyone else, and where someone had the sense to put a jug of ale and another of river water on the long table, and 3 cups that were not silver and therefore would not be remarked upon later in some gossip trail. "He intends that often," Stark said. It was true, and it was all he would say of the king's reputation as a man who had preferred rooms to fields, until rooms fell away and fields were all that was left. But this time he is a king, Barristan said. He spoke without heat. He will come. Then we will sit, Stark said. He seemed older than Jaime had expected. Or not older, more settled, as one is when a weight sets deeper into the meat of the shoulder. There is much to say. Of Lyanna, Barristan said, and the river water on the table shifted under some small draft, made a rim-bound wave that was no wave at all. Stark's mouth changed. Of her, he said, and of the men who are dead over a song and a rose and a prince who forgot his house was made of people and not staves of music. The deft silence that often served Rhaegar was not available to them here. The words were on the table like bright knives. Jaime spared them no glances. He looked at Stark's hand, which lifted and laid down the cup without tremor, and at the line across the knuckles that said a sword had rubbed there for too many days without glove. He looked at Barristan's thumb, which lay idle on the edge of his own cup, and at the way that thumb did not move. He thought his own hands looked now like the hands of someone he had met once at court, an artisan who scraped designs into wood with a small curved knife and who could make a bird out of the whirl of grain. Will he bring her? Stark asked very flatly after a small time. The king will not parade the woman he loves, Barristan said. The king will not parade the woman who is not his wife, Stark said, and his face showed fin. Ally the small shift of skin that meant some muscle under it had stirred. The hint of heat, the hint of cold's brittle anger. He will not parade her, but neither will he hide her if he thinks hiding her makes a lie or a sin of her. He will do what men do when they believe they've been blessed beyond right. He will count blessings as if they were rights. Jaime felt then the shape of a pit under the words. He did not know how it would open. He knew how pits worked, though. He had looked down into one once in a boyhood quarry, and the way it had stared back at him had made his mouth taste like pennies. We do not speak of her as if she is a loaf on a table, Barristan said gently, and the gentleness made the words heavier. We do not speak of her that way, Lord Stark. Neither of us would permit it. Then Lord Rhaegar will do so? Stark said. No, Jaime said, and then paused at his own certainty and accepted it. He will not. He will not give you the respect of less than truth. Stark drank and placed the cup down on the wood. I hope, he said, for my sister. She is stubborn, and she can be cruel when she wishes to be, and she believes her sorrows are always larger than other people's because she feels them more. But she is not a thing. She is the heart that beat in our house. Then we will not handle her like kindling, Jaime said. He could feel his own mouth now, as if he had been holding a sword between his teeth and had just placed it on a table. They spoke of oaths then, the way men do when in doubt. Like a man sticks his hand into his purse and counts coins he knows full well the number of. The words were familiar and not enough. They did not speak of Robert yet. He was the hammer. He would not arrive first. The nails would wait for him. When Jaime left that room, sunset had smudged its thumb along the western sky, and the towers around the court of the fountain glowed the way embers glow when they have done their burning and now only remember it. He walked without company down to the kitchens because he was tired of wine and wanted broth, honest and animal, with bread. The kitchen was wild in the way kitchens are at that hour. Steam rising from every pot, men grabbing spoons like weapons and clacking them against the sides of things, a child asleep on a sack of nettles as if daring the plant to prick him into wakefulness. The cook, an enormous woman with hair the color of oats and a scar that disappeared into the pack of flesh below her jaw, handed him a bowl because he had stood where men were handed bowls and had not announced himself as a man who did not receive bowls. You're one of the white chickens, she said, not unkindly. You'll take the marrow or you'll take the clear? The marrow, he said, because he had been noble all day and did not care to live on clear liquids. She winked. A man who knows his guts, she said. Good. He ate standing, with a slice of bread hard as a paddle in the same hand as his bowl, and found that the simple salt and heat made him feel constructed again, as if his bones had been joints in a frame and the broth was a rope tightening them. He listened to the kitchen's language. Knives talk. Spoons talk. The sound of people being fed is the best lie against war. The men who have fed others never believe it fully. The lie slips if you hold it up to light, like a stretched egg wash, all coated and thin. But he let himself believe it a minute. In the court, Bayard, the steward whose mouth folded in, approached with a pace like someone going to a small fire with a pail. "Sire," he said, and unfolded his mouth. "A rider from the south. He says Tywin Lannister has quit the Rock." Jaime did not move at once. He placed the bowl on the ledge of the nearest alcove and spoke without turning. "The direction? East," Bayard said, and then, after only a slight pause, "For now." The words struck and bounced around inside him with a little hollowness before they found places to lodge. His father was out. Tywin moved when he had measured how far it was to the edge, how far the ground would give, and how far it would still be to fall. Jaime thought of Cersei then, because he could not prevent it, and the thought came with an old, cruel joy, a dangerous sweetness on the back of his tongue, and with it an ache that had nothing to do with sin and everything to do with the shape of longing in a man who has allowed himself little else. He swallowed both and said, "We will receive him if he comes." "Yes, sire," Bayard said, with the primitive look of a man who has been told that wolves and lambs are to be put into the same pen and has never quite believed that such things are done. He slept later with his sword nearby and his left hand under the pillow. He dreamed again. This time bells were ladders. Men climbed them and looked down from their tops and waved and then fell, not because someone had pushed them but because bells are round and men do not stand easily on round things. He woke laughing at himself, then frowned at the emptiness of the room, and then smiled a little because he knew what the dream was and its simple cruelty and how it meant to frighten him, and he declined to be frightened by it properly. He would be frightened another day, not this night. The next morning, Rhaegar came, and with him came the quiet that falls in a hall when a judge enters. Not because a judge is feared, but because his presence means a decision will be made, while everyone else's blood still runs hot. Rhaegar walked as if the stones were telling him their history with each step. Men rose to see him, and some of those men scowled because scowling had become a habit, and some because they had learned from the old king that princes are excuses for pain. But Rhaegar looked at them as if they were a kind of song he had not yet learned to sing and that he was willing to try to learn. He greeted Eddard Stark as if the cold were a person who had lately shaken his hand. He greeted Roose Bolton as if one might set a hand upon lightly iced stone and not lose the skin. He greeted Randall Tarley as if handing him a spear that the man had himself just crafted. He did not greet Lord Fry until Lord Fry had finished counting the reasons he had came so late, and then he greeted him with such exact measure that even the old man had to blink. Harrenhal held them all like a basket. From the galleries, the Isle of Faces watched without blinking, and the trees there, if one believed such things, did not comment. The council began not with speeches but with a list of names. Rhaegar spoke them in no particular order. He said them as if he had practiced them like scales. They were the names of men who had been burned at the old king's pleasure or on his whim, of men who had fed the pyre, of men who had carried the pitch, of small folk who had been made into warnings when warnings were no longer needed. He spoke as if he were reading a memorial stone that had not yet been carved. When he finished, he said, "The realm is my responsibility. I am not my father. The realm is safety and bread, and the right to say a prayer and not be killed for the sound of it. It is that a man may go from these stones to the lake and not be arrowed in the back by a man who calls himself my friend. I will prove this and not merely say it." "How?" Lord Tarley asked, blunt as a block of wood used to break others into planks. "First I will punish those who have earned punishment," Rhaegar said. "Then I will build enough to keep men busy. Then I will forbid certain kinds of gossip that take years off other men's lives." Someone laughed at that, and the laugh snagged the air. "I will marry too," he said, in the tone of a man who has decided to say a thing at a time not of the gods' choosing but of his own. "And no, I will not say more today than this. I will not break the law of the seven as it stands. I will not make a second wife, and I will not set my first aside. The question of my heart is mine. The question of my house is yours." Men sucked their teeth. Men murmured. Someone like Lord Piper smiled in his hand. Ned Stark's eyes did not move. He held still as if he had expected that and would not give away the fact of his expectation for any coin they had. "You will punish," Roose Bolton said almost lazily. "And whom? The dead are safe. You will not make a scaffold of ghosts. You will have to name the living." "I will," Rhaegar said. "I will name pyromancers who fed the old king with their lies and fever. I will name a septon who made the holy words for murder. I will name men who stood by and were glad. I will not punish enemies for being enemies. I will punish crimes." "And what of Tywin Lannister?" It was Oberyn who said it, from the side like a man slips a knife into a seam, and Rhaegar's head turned and his face was ordinary and simple as a cup. The room paused on its breath. "I will call him to me," Rhaegar said, "with reason and with terms. If he comes, I will bind him with those terms. If he does not come, I will consider him in the light of the law and of prudence. The city did not burn because a man in white did what others would not. I will give the man in red the courtesy of the same measure." Jaime watched the council move the way a tide moves, outward and then in, leaving wet sand behind. He watched Stark mostly because Stark held the thread that kept the sand from collapsing everywhere at once. He thought of Cersei again, which was unwise. He thought of his father, moving. He thought of the smell of dragon fire, which he had never known and yet somehow held in his throat at times like a phantom scent. He thought of a boy with a wooden sword chasing a dog, laughing, his cap catching on its teeth, and the way the boy had not cried when he fell because there was no one to tell him he should. When the council ended, at a time that felt both too late and too early, and men stumbled out looking relieved to have their own feet again, Jaime found himself walking beside Ned Stark. The air outside the hall was cold enough to make their breath show. The day had moved a step toward winter. "Will you fight him?" Jaime asked, surprising himself. He had meant to say something else. He had meant to ask something that would benefit the king. "Who?" Stark said. He looked at Jaime with the half-lidded clarity of a man who has chosen to speak truth when it costs him and therefore has not been careless of his tongue for many years. "Robert? Rhaegar? My sister? Myself." "The hammer," Jaime said. He saw, in his mind, Robert Baratheon's chest, wide under hair. And his voice like a barrel is a voice, big, with hidden staves that hold it together. He had watched him once in a yard, young, laughing, and had fallen a little in love with the way the man's body seemed born to strike and to embrace. "If he strikes where a head should be," Stark said, "I will help him. If he strikes where a head cannot be found, I will not be the other hand that holds the axe to the block. He was my brother in arms. He is still my friend. I will not be the man who says his grief ended somewhere convenient to me." He looked out at the lake, and then back at Jaime in a way that carried a fine sort of curiosity, as if he were still willing to discover that men are better than he suspects. "And you? Will you fight your father if your king asks it?" Jaime's mouth made a shape that could have become a smile if he had not checked it. "My father and I do not often stand so near as to require it. He is in rooms where rapier suits. I am in courtyards. He is a hand on a ledger. I am a hand on a hilt. But if the day demanded it," he stopped. He felt the careful wood of his words. "If the day demanded it," he said finally softly, "I would hold to what I am." "A white cloak," Stark said neutrally. "A man who does or does not do a thing," Jaime said. "The cloak is the robe that reminds me to ask the question." They walked. In silence then, a comfortable thing like two dogs who do not need to pretend not to be dogs. They parted without ceremony. Jaime stood for a time under a tree with a few dry leaves that clicked faintly in a pattern that meant nothing and reminded him of the clink of armor in a polite hall. It was 3 days after the council began that Robert Baratheon arrived, as if a large boulder had been dropped upstream and had come rolling down with inevitability. His men sang. The song was crude and explicit and would have sounded horrible if not for the fact that the men believed it, and so it had a sort of sincerity burned into it like a browned edge on bread. Robert rode a black destrier that bit at the air. He wore furs and a surcoat that had seen better washing. He looked like a king of an earlier sort, the kind who would trade men for meat and not count the cost if the meal were hot and his laughter deep. He dismounted with a thump and a loud breath like a bellows and saw Rieger where the stair dropped into the yard. And for a second the yard was a room too small for both men. And then Robert roared and the sound was almost a laugh and almost a sob, and he said, "You have the nerve to come to me, Prince?" And Rieger said, "I came for the realm, Robert." And then it was a war again, but not with swords. They did not fight then. They stood nearer than men who hate do, because they had once been nearer still in other ways, if not in friendship, then in the proximity of being the suns around which others revolved. Robert's eyes were bloodshot. He had not slept well. Rieger's were clear but rimmed with the tiredness that comes of planning how to carry a mountain in both hands. "Where is she?" Robert said, his voice low, and the men nearest pretended they had never learned to hear. "She is safe," Rieger said, "and she is not yours or mine to brand and lead. She is herself." Robert moved as if something had bitten him. His hand went to the place on his breast where a medallion might have hung on a more cautious man. "You speak like a mincing peddler of words," he snarled. "She was promised to me, and she is a woman," Rieger said, with the gentleness that seemed to enrage or to melt, and Robert would not melt. "She has said she does not wish your bed. I will not be made a cuckold of my own betrothal," Robert said, lifting his head like a bull. "I will not be made a fool by a harpist." "You will or will not, as it pleases you," Rieger said. "But it is not law, and it is not justice. It is pride. Pride enough to unseat a king," Robert said. "No," Rieger said. "Pride enough to kill a city. I will not let that be the end of our story." He looked at the yard then, at the men listening, and his voice went quieter still. "Do not make me choose between your love and the realm, Robert. You will not like the choice I make." The wind took a small breath. Jaime watched the muscles of Robert's jaw. He saw the memory move through the man, as if someone had poured water down through him and he were only now feeling the chill of it in his feet. "What do you offer, then?" Robert said. "What does the prince who would be king put on the table as meat for men who have bled for him? We have friends in the ground and debts in our bone marrow." "An end," Rieger said, "and a beginning. Bread that is not ash. Names carved where they should be, and not in whispers. A wedding. A child's christening by next autumn in the sept at Storm's End, if the gods are kind." Robert flinched at that as if struck. "Whose wedding?" he asked, and the courtyard could have stood for a courtroom. It had the air of a place judgment's stick. "Elbert Aerys," Rieger said, and something like laughter, small and shocked, rippled and died, because Elbert was dead. Rieger did not smile. "I will make them rise," he said. "Not the dead, but the living. There will be enough wedding to satisfy the habit of a country that cannot be contented without sheets. There will be ribbons until the women tire of plaiting them. There will be men punished and there will be men set free. There will be lands returned. And you, Lord Robert, will have better than a promise you did not want once it came to you with a crown laid inside it. I will find you a wife who will not weep for another man. You deserve that much." "Doi," Robert said, and the words came from a place under the meat, a place near the bone, and the yard forgot it was a yard and was for a moment a room where a man had said something as naked as an infant. Then the moment ended and he laughed, and the laugh was rough. "Who then? Which lord's fat daughter? Which maiden not a maid? The girl at Winterfell is quickening," Rieger said. "Her sister is not. She is kind, I am told, and you might be kind with a woman who asks no more of you than laughter." "The wolf's cub," Robert said slowly, tasting the idea and trying to spit it out or swallow it. Jaime could not tell which he attempted. "You make yourself a weaver, Prince. I have always been the cloth." "And a good one," Rieger said. "It is time to mend. Help me do it." He lifted his hands then, not in appeal but as if making plain that they were empty. There was no decision in that yard. A yard is not a place where decisions settle. They must be brought inside and fed, or they starve and then return at night as barbed creatures. Rieger let the day move and left the yard with the men looking at his back and Robert's breath still heavy in their memory. That night Jaime did not dream of bells. He dreamed of a white ship going from Dragonstone with a newborn on it and storms building like theater behind it. He dreamed of a woman with silver hair whose eyes had none of Rhaegar's tiredness and all of his clarity. He dreamed of Cersei's mouth, which was not a dream at all but an old sin and a present, small hunger, and woke with the taste of both hope and self-derision crooking his smile. In the morning, Tywin Lannister entered Harrenhal as if he owned it and had only just decided to look in on it. He rode without haste at the head of a column that presented itself as neat as any at a tourney contest of best dressed. His cloak was not ostentatious but was expensive enough to be understood by the sort of eyes that count stitches. He dismounted with brevity and very straight legs for a man of his years and looked up along the wall and did not nod. He found his son where he knew he would be found. Not at the king's elbow, not at the council table, but in the long shadow between the two, where men who guard stand and wait and listen to doors. He came to Jaime and did not embrace him. He said, "Son," with such articulation that you could have balanced a coin on the crossbar of the word and it would not have tipped. "Father," Jaime said. He kept his voice not softer than necessary and not harder than honest. They stood. A Lannister and another Lannister standing is a kind of furniture. Rooms adjust themselves. Men made way without knowing they had. Rhaegar saw them and remained where he was on the stair, as if discourtesy were a tool too crude to use. Robert looked at Tywin Lannister the way a man looks at a fortified door, with impatience and anticipation in equal parts. "You quit the rock," Jaime said, "because someone must say the thing that needed saying, and Rhaegar could not be the first to speak it and Robert would turn it into a blow." "I did," Tywin said, with a little lift of his long mouth that was not amusement but something more expensive. "I have had enough of rats in the cellars and wanted to inspect the floors above." "You come to serve the realm," Rhaegar said. He had closed the distance in that moment with some invisible stitch, his voice near and weighty. He had come without a guard, which Jaime marked and would have argued had he been asked, and which he would nevertheless keep as a useful fact in the ledger of reasons men might choose to trust. "Or to serve something else by serving the realm first," he added, because honesty had become the coin of his rule and he would not spend lies cheaply. Tywin's eyes moved to the king. They had no expression in them at all for a long breath. Then a faint candle showed behind them. "We have all been fools," he said, and the big room murmured, and someone's cup bumped and tipped, and a little beer ran down onto the table and was wiped with a sleeve. "Fools for pride and fools for patience. My king, I have come because I prefer a city that still stands, because I prefer a realm that will not waste my children and their children. I have come to say that I will bear with you the weight of such work as must be done." "You come to bear it or to measure it?" Robert said, the grin back upon his face like a wound covered with a bandage with eyes drawn upon it. Tywin did not look at Robert. He looked at the king and at Jaime and at the space between them. "The work does not change because a man measures it," he said, and if the barb was meant for Robert, he had delivered it at an angle no one could fault. "It changes only in how much of it is dropped and how much lands upon feet. I would prefer to set it down without breaking any toes if possible." Jaime felt a breath he had not known he'd been holding leave him. His father would never do him the courtesy of plain affection, but Tywin could offer him dignity in the form of competence, and he sometimes did, magnanimous as a careful rain after a drought. Their eyes met a moment. In his father's gaze he saw the addition that had been done long ago. 2 sons, 1 daughter, 1 wife dead, 1 name, 7 kinds of coin, and in the total he saw a small empty space, like a knocked-out tile in a mosaic. Tywin had never gotten back the piece that was removed. It had changed the pattern unbeknownst to him. Perhaps he knew now. Perhaps he had come to learn what he had made. In the end, the council at Harrenhal lasted week upon week. Not a siege, but a kind of liturgy. They established that men would be charged for the things they had done and not for what flags they had flown. They established that Lyanna would not be dragged to court like a hawker's goose as proof of supper. They established a marriage for Robert that would not be a play performed with veils over everyone's faces. They spoke of the girl Sansa Stark and a year of decent mourning and the sending of an honest dowry. They wrote down 10 points and then 8, and then 4 more, and Jaime saw that the slimness of the paper made men's courage rise. He saw that the things named charter are really spells. They set men loose to go home and find plows under their hay, if they had any hay left. They sent others with a king's writ to count grain and not steal it. They wrote edicts in words thick and true and sealed them with a dragon made in fresh wax. They did not hang any man in Harrenhal. That would come later, in smaller places where men had done dreadful things in small ways and then had gone to bed thinking, as a man always thinks, that the thing lay outside him. Jaime rode south once the paper was inked and dried and rolled and tied. The road gave up new spring, timid and half-frozen in the ditches, green just a rumor and then a fact in the hedgerows. He thought of the city as if it were something he had taken under his cloak as a boy hides a pie. He thought of Cersei again, and then less because the horse needs a rider who is where he is, and the saddle made the decision for him. King's Landing greeted him with the stink and the sweetness that always accompany one another. He felt a kind of homecoming that is not love but something like profession. He went first to the Queen Mother by instinct more than plan. Riella wore her hair bound close and her hands were thinner, and she looked at him with a thought that crossed her face like a bird crossing a stretch of sky and then was gone. "You went and returned," she said simply, as if the fact were an accomplishment enough for any man in a time when many did one and did not keep the other. "I gave the words," he said. "They were taken. The king is not alone in them." "No," she said. "No king ever is." She tilted her head. "You have lost some weight." "They fed us," he said. "But not like here. No one feeds like a frightened city," she said. She smiled just a little. "We thought to feed the flames once. Now we feed men. It is a fashion I prefer." He stood there and did not tell her what he had done, because she knew it and had no use hearing it, and he had no desire to say it where the air might catch it and make it a gossip toy. They stood like two figures in an unfinished altar carving. She lifted a hand as if to touch his cheek and did not touch it. Elia came with her son. The boy ran straight at Jaime's knees with honest joy because the boy had been allowed to use him as a pole at some children's game. "White tree," Aegon shouted, and Riella smiled despite herself. "Your father is returning," Jaime said to Elia. He saw the way her shoulders relaxed half a finger's breadth. He saw also the way she checked herself because she was wise enough to know that returns are as perilous as departures. Elia's eyes were tired but very alive. There was a patient slyness to her now, a way in which she had decided to survive not by hiding but by offering the world what was requested of her with such precision that it could not ask for more. "He will be welcomed," Elia said carefully, measuring each syllable. "We will make a place for him that is his and not his father's." "That is the plan," Jaime said, and the phrase sounded like a map, like ropes, like a charter, like a prayer. The days that followed in the city were like days at the cusp of a season. Men took off their cloaks in the afternoon and put them on again at evening. Wagons began to come into the markets with things not strictly necessary. Honey in little jars, dyed thread that had no war to make it urgent to be read, a cage of chaffinches that became prophets when they sang. The watch set fewer fires in the alleys as warnings because there were fewer men who needed reminding that they were being watched. A woman in Flea Bottom started to sell meat pies with rosemary because she had found some somewhere, and that fact spread through the city by a current that always exists no matter who sits on a throne. A boy who had never seen a ship stood on the quays and watched one come in, and his mouth made a shape around the sight that meant, perhaps. Yet there were also letters. Letters like small blades that slip under the skin. Letters that carried names of men not even important enough to make a noise dying who had burned a house that might have held a man who had once laughed with the king's father. Letters that said, "The North has memories. Do not pull this strand too tight or it will break and cut your hand." Letters that came from the West with a lion seal and words the color of iron. "My son is what he has chosen to be. Do not ask him to be what I require." Letters from Dorne with the scent of orange blossoms hidden in the paper like something dangerous. Letters that carried not threat but insistence. "My sister is a queen and will dance in a hall where such is remembered with more than murmurs." Varys carried those letters and he did not carry them. The letters moved under their own twitching power, and Jaime caught them only with the side of his sight as he had learned to catch all the little snakes that run around the feet of big ones. He saw Cersei at last in the solar that had been the Queen Mother's once and was now a room for women who liked light, as Cersei always had. She was sitting at a table with a book open and a hand laid on the page as if to steady the past. Her hair was like gold under water. Her mouth was the mouth he had kissed when they were young enough to believe that desire was a virtue because it was honest. When she looked up, he felt in his belly the same foolish tilt and drop that had made him fall off a horse when he was 13 and eager and looking at her instead of where he rode. "Brother," she said, and smiled. And the word had so much in it that it seemed like a garment hung over the back of a chair covering a sword. There were servants. There are always servants in rooms like this. They went out when Cersei moved her eyes toward the door and then looked deliberately away. She stood and came to him. She touched his face, unlike the Queen Mother who had not, and the touch was not sisterly. It was exactly what it was. It was also a weapon. "You did not write," she murmured, as if between them even the gods must concede that words are unnecessary things unless one wishes to lie. "I did not," he said. "I was busy. Saving kings," she said, with the ironic curl she used when she wanted to remind him that none of this was bigger than their father, and that neither of them had ever really believed in dragons except as coins and levers. "And what does my sweet king do with our father now that he's brought his pack of gold men to heal?" "He places him where he can do the least harm," Jaime said, "and the most good, at the purse strings, for now." "Purses strangle better than hands," Cersei said very lightly. She turned her head and he watched the line of her throat and felt a sick gladness. "Is the wolf here? The one with the tired face?" "Yes," he said. "He is decent." "Oh, Jaime," she said, half laughing not at him but at the world. "Decent. That is your word now." He did not answer, and the silence was a reply. She recognized it and let it be. She moved away, and the light from the window caught the back of her neck, and he wanted to put his hand there and felt the old reflex moving in him, and the older caution that had begun to craft him returned it to its sheath. "Tell me about the girl," Cersei said. "The wolf's sister, the one with the flowers. Is she beautiful enough to make men this mad?" He considered. He did not know Lyanna truly. He had seen her twice at a distance. He had seen Rhaegar with his hands upon a harp. He saw in his mind a winter rose and a laughter that did not belong to anyone polite. "She is herself," he said, echoing the king without intending to. Cersei smiled, and in her smile he saw the danger he had missed, the one that had always been beautiful and familiar and therefore had never seemed to him a danger at all. "That will not do," she said. "That will not do at all." Outside the solar, a page ran past with ink on his chin and a strip of parchment clenched in his fist, headed toward the towers where the king read his letters with his own fingers. The city shifted and clicked around itself, making new edges and new seams. Jaime went back to the White Sword Tower that afternoon and took down the great book with its vellum pages and the marks of hands that had touched it like a relic and wrote, in a neat hand he had been forced to cultivate, the things he had done and the things that had been told him to do. He wrote without flourish. He wrote his name and he wrote under it, "The city preserved, the king preserved, the realm set at council." He did not write the other name, the one that had found him in the hinge of a door. Such a name does not get brave pages. It gets men who use it bluntly in an argument to win another thing, lesser and immediate. He left it where it belonged, on the street and in the mouths of those who could not look down from a high window and see far beyond their own rooftops. At dusk, Rhaegar played in a small room with a few listeners. He played a song no one had heard before, slow and precise. The notes held until they began to ache in the air and then let go gently, like a hand that has been holding tight for so long it scarcely remembers how to release. Jaime stood at the door and listened and thought that there are ways to burn a city that have nothing to do with fire, and ways to save one that do not involve blades. He had learned one of the ways. He could learn the other, perhaps. When the song ended, no one spoke. The king set the harp down and ran his fingers very lightly along its frame, like a man smoothing a child's hair. Then he looked up and said, "Tomorrow we will hang 2 men." He said it the way he had played, quietly, carefully. "They carried pitch at my father's order, at my father's pleasure. They have confessed and they do not see yet why I hang them. They will see it as they climb." He turned his head and looked at Jaime, and in his eyes there was something that might have been asking or might have been gratitude. And Jaime, who had not done the thing he had done for the sake of a king's eyes, nodded once. He would stand and he would watch when the rope did its work. He had learned that, too, that there are things a city must see in order to remember what it is. He slept that night without dreams, which was almost worse because waking came with a blank in it where the nightmares should have been, and the blank felt like a hole in a road he had been thrown over without warning. He walked the halls early and passed a window where the gull had returned and made its small noise, and the day smelled of bread and bay and something electric that might have been the hint of a storm. He felt his hands as if just receiving them. He was a man in a white cloak and a man with a blade and a boy who had once dreamt of glory and a brother who had once been stupid and happy, and a son of a man who had learned how to move with the world rather than fail to move and be moved by it in the ugliest ways. He was all of that, and he did not hate any of it, not at the moment when the sun put its gold upon the stone like a blessing. News came as it always does. A raven from the Vale with an old man's neat handwriting that described in 3 lines what years had wrought. A pouch from the Reach with coin and a note more valuable than coin promising ships to carry grain from old stores and to keep the bread here in the city cheap enough to ignore the grumble of bellies turned into slogans. A letter from Dorn in a lady's hand, thin, nearly transparent as a prayer, that took 3 pages to say, "I will forgive and I will not forget," and below it, in a second script, a flourish that made Jaime smile despite himself. "Tell the golden boy that I look forward to seeing whether his blade is sharper than his hair." It was signed with a spear drawn in a line quick as living. In the evening he went to the Godswood within the Red Keep, the thin, sickly stand of trees that had never learned to be dignified. He stood nonetheless, and he thought of the Isle of Faces, where the trees had been watching longer than any of them had been alive, and he wondered if the face carved upon the heart tree there had any opinion of men who were steady and men who were brave and men who were clever. He suspected that it did not. He suspected it held all men alike in a patience so vast as to make the word pride sound like a fly in a pitcher of milk. Elia came to him there like a ghost gently correcting a miswritten name. He turned and bowed a little and did not look at her too long because to look at her too long was to ask a question he had no right to ask. She was wrapped in a shawl too thin for the evening. She said, with her small, dry humor, "You look like a man trying to become a tree." "I am a man trying to become a thing that does not run," he said. "That is a tree," she said, "or a wall." "Do not become a wall, Sir Jaime. We have enough walls that do not know when to open." "I will choose a tree then," he said, "one that remembers what covered it in winter and still leaves." "We all will choose," she said. "Even those who pretend choosing is not their art." She looked at him straight on, and he saw in her the tenderness that would never leave her and the cunning that would be forced upon her until she wore it like a familiar sea. "Look, your sister is a knife. Forgive me the rudeness. Knives are useful," he said, hearing in his own voice the way a man defends his worst decisions by placing them on shelves too high to reach. "And dangerous," Elia said, with a little smile not unkind. "But you do not need the queen of the knives. You could choose the tree." "I do not know how to be other than I have been," he said, which was a coward's truth and yet contained truth enough to be not entirely cowardice. "You did once in a room with a king who had forgotten the name of people," Elia said. "You chose. You were other than you had been." She wrapped the shawl closer and watched the sky. "Choose again." She left him with that like a cup set down. He did not know whether to drink or to let it cool. The hangings the next day were quiet and awful and absolutely necessary. From the crowd a voice cried once, and then was smothered by silence. Men stood with their hands wrapped around each other's wrists. Women put cloth in their mouths and bit it. The men who died were small enough to be pitiable and guilty enough not to be excused. Rhaegar watched. Jaime watched. When it was done, the king sent 2 small boys to carry away the stools that had been kicked. They were to be scrubbed later and set back under tables for eating. Such is the way of cities. Jaime stood a while after and looked at the empty rope, and then he took his leave, and he did not drink 2 nights running because he did not want to forget the grain of the rope or the boy with the stool. Letters came and were answered. Men went and returned and did not return. The hammer left with a bride not yet wife and a promise to keep his fists for enemies who were named. He laughed louder as he left than he had as he came, and the laugh was freer. Ned Stark departed with the shape of the city on his face, as if it had stamped him the way a seal stamps heavy wax, and with a letter from the king to the sister no man would parade. Tywin Lannister stayed and moved coin and men and the slow machinery of law, his mouth never changing from its line and his eyes measuring the angles. And for the first time since Jaime had put on white, the space between them contained more than reproach or command. It contained a sort of wary respect, a finding of position. And things which require longer than a summer to ripen began to throw out their first leaves. A school for healers that would insist on clean water before knives, a list of all who had been exiled to the cities across the narrow sea who might be allowed return if they had not made war while gone, a plan for bridges in the riverlands that would not collapse under the next flood. The king did not play as often. When he did, the notes were heavier, less like sighs and more like statements. The dragon banners were mended where they had torn, not by pride but by the hands of women who had mended too many other things and knew how to hold cloth and weather at the same time without letting either rip them. In this, time moved, indifferent and relentless and making everything old and new. And in the white of his cloak and the red of his blood and the black of his thoughts, Jaime continued to stand, to step, to draw, to sheath, to speak, to listen. He set his hand on the railing of a stair. He watched a child learn to hold a ball. He put a rope down off a hook. He kissed his sister and hated himself and then did not go to her for 2 months because he had been told by a queen to choose, and because he had chosen once and a city had not burned. He did not choose entirely well, but he learned the shape of choosing. And very late one night, when the wind on the bay had the keen edge of a blade that hasn't been used yet, he climbed to the top of the tower with the best view and looked out and saw, far off, a glimmer on the water that might have been a ship. It moved with the purposeful slowness of tide and human will joined. He could not see the figure on its deck. He did not know if the woman upon it would come to love this city or to break it. He knew only that the morning would come again, and that gulls would make their complaint, and that men would lay out their pens and their swords and their bread, and that he would stand again with his white upon his shoulders and decide between two injustices which was the smaller. And that, for the moment, was enough.